The only bummer about this is I can't show the book, so we'd have to obviously, when you watch the video, you have to follow along. Okay, so we're live right now, folks. Welcome to live. It's only a little weird, right?
So every time you have to say, it's Mr. Courtney back with another video. Please do that.
We gotta come up with a new. All right, this is Mr. Courtney back in history class. Back with another video. We're talking about Napoleon today. So yesterday we ended up talking about, or we finished talking about what?
The Reign of
Terror. Yeah. The Reign of Terror. What was the reason? What was the government, first of all, that did the Reign of Terror? National Convention. And then the party that was in charge of the National Convention at the time? The Jacobins. And the leaders of the Jacobins? And Robespierre, very good. So what was the reason those guys and that group and that government were so freaking mean? Terrorizing. They're paranoid that everybody was against them. Paranoid that everybody was trying to stop the revolution. Right? Is that a reasonable paranoia? Yeah, like, were there a lot of groups trying to stop the revolution? Were some of those groups really powerful? Like other countries, right? So they were sort of justified in their feelings. Now their actions, not so much. I think we could all agree. Just killing everybody is not a good idea. But how did the people of France feel when that's all said and done? The Reign of Terror is pretty much over. How do the people feel? Right? Yeah, they're like, dude, this is pretty much worse than the monarchy, right? And that's the whole point of having this revolution. So there's a lot of people ready for something different, maybe something looks like a king. Now, I wanted to talk about this because when we talked about this kind of situation, did England have a similar situation where they like had a civil war and then had like sort of a kill the guy in charge moment? Right? Yeah. When that was all said and done and Cromwell was finally gone and that sort of weirdness was done, the Commonwealth, what kind of government did England create? Constitutional monarchy. And I wanted to make you guys understand, they went back, it was pretty, during Cromwell, it was crazy, right? Pretty tumultuous. I'm not sure what was going to happen. When they went to go create a new government, they fell back on the things they knew, the things they were comfortable with, right? They fell back on, we need a king and we need a parliament, right? Well, but that's because in England, those two things had been there for a long time, right? There's been hundreds of years of parliament and thousands of years of kings or whatever. Does France have anything like that? Do they have a tradition of anything other than a king? No, not really, right? Not at least in the modern era. They have a king and an absolute king at that. So they don't have a tradition, an expectation of having a say, right? That's not something, in England, it was like everybody already knew. When we make a government, we're all going to have a say. It's like, that's what we do. But in France, that's not the case, right? So they're going to have to sort of figure out how to have a republic, at the same time have what makes them feel comfortable, which is a strong individual leader. And not to mention everybody's just coming off this Reign of Terror. So it's going to be a little funky. Does that make sense to you guys? All right. So despite the dangers and the difficulties of the time, the National Convention met for 3 years between 92 and 95 and made many democratic reforms. These changes affected every level of French society. The convention created a body called the Committee on Public Safety. We've talked about them. Controlled by the Jacobins. This committee tried to establish what is called a republic of virtue. By this, it meant a democratic republic in which people would act according to the principles of good citizenship. What is good citizenship? Is that the same everywhere? No, so they're going to have to figure out and define what that looks like for themselves. They want to be virtuous. So to accomplish this, committee opened new schools and supported the idea of universal elementary education. In the notes, we're going to just talk about a couple things they do after the Reign of Terror before we get into government number 5. Okay. So after the Reign of Terror, in an attempt to try to reestablish some peace and harmony and whatnot, they're going to improve elementary education. All right. Do you need to be educated to some level to be a good, virtuous citizen? Yeah, you do, right? You got to know what that looks like. You got to understand what a good citizen is and how they act. You don't need to be a doctor or anything, but you do need to have some education. That's going to be mandatory. To aid the economy, the committee established wage and price controls intended to stop inflation. So wage and price controls, basically a minimum and maximum wage, but mostly a minimum wage. Everybody gets a certain amount of money. We understand that, yeah? And then they also put minimum and maximum prices on products so that you couldn't get priced out of something. They wanted to make it all these different products available to everybody. At least try to. Okay. Committee worked to address human rights concerns as well. It abolished slavery in France's colonies and encouraged religious toleration. Dang, so in 1793, 4, 5, France already abolished slavery. You guys know when America does it? Way later than that, right? When do they do it? When does America do it? Maybe don't tell me a date, tell me a time period. What after the Civil War, yeah? It's about the 1860s, late 60s. So we're talking another 70 years in America of slavery. Why is it so easy for France to get rid of their slaves and so difficult for America to? How do you mean?
Initially, a lot of farmers slaves.
Yeah, we were very much economically dependent on slaves, right? France had slaves and it was a thing, but it wasn't like their whole economy relied on slavery. America was very dependent, or a large portion of it was dependent on slavery. So we couldn't just give up that free money. It was too hard. They were like, not to mention, guys, where did they abolish slavery at? In their colonies. So can they still have slaves in France? Yeah, they can. What do you know? But they also encourage religious toleration, religious tolerance. What's the predominant religion in France? Catholic. They tend to be the least hospitable to any other Protestant type religions. So that's kind of opened up the door to more openness as far as religion is concerned. So they also wanted to replace the monarchy's confusing system of weights and measures with the metric system. You guys all know what the metric system looks like, yeah? Based on the number 10, we should totally be using that thing. If it was up to me, we would be, but we don't. We use our system, right? Why do we have our system? Why does America do our thing? It's the same reason France is going to try to use this new calendar. They're going to try to create this new calendar. It's not going to work. You guys know why? Why does America have its own number system? Nobody knows? Not even a guess? Partly because when we were fighting against the British, we didn't want to be like the British. When we got our freedom, we wanted to be different. Just like, guys, America was trying to replicate a lot of the things that Rome had done and accomplished and sort of set the tone for a new era, right? So in Rome, when they Augustus Caesar is the emperor, he decides he's going to change the calendar in Rome. And the calendar we use today is that calendar that he created. Sort of took the old one, messed with it a little bit, put out this new 12-month system that we live by. 7 days in a week, different names of the months are named after different things. Like August is named after Augustus. It was his favorite month. It was in the middle of summer. Not that crazy, right? July, named after Julius Caesar. March is Marzo, named after Mars, the Greek god, the Roman god. So that calendar is now 2,000 years old, and we use it in most of the world uses it. And that's why it starts at 0 around then, right? Because they created that. And so it's sort of like this, like they created this new era, this new time period moving forward. Rome had that big impact. So America wanted to try to do that kind of thing. So without changing the calendar, they can change the numbers, they can change little things here and there and sort of have this new American era, right? France is going to try the same thing with this new calendar. They go a little bit off the rails, but this convention also created a new calendar naming September 22nd, 1792 as day 0 or day 1 of the Republic. The first day of the year, it's the first year of liberty. This calendar used colorful names that reflected the seasons, like Thermidor was the warm month, and Ventos was the windy month, March. This calendar also increased the number of days in a week to 10, or a decade, right? That's where, how many years are in a decade? 10. The whole deca thing, the prefix meaning 10, right? So that's where the decade comes from. They tried to do a decade for 10 days instead of 10 years. The calendar didn't survive, but it does reflect the French people's hope that the new republic would mark the dawn of a new era. Right? They were trying to do that thing. America and France both at the same time trying to pull that off, right? Because America's doing the same thing at this time. That's when we're messing with our math system and all that. So meanwhile, the French army went on to victory. By 1795, the French had driven invaders from French soil and conquered territory as far as the Rhine River. Even more important, the coalition of European countries against France began to break up. The new militaristic spirit swept the country. Remember when we talked about, when we first started this chapter, we talked about one of the problems in France was the overpopulation, right? This huge population boom. Well, that's been happening now for about 10 or 12 years. And then the revolution included, that's another 4 or 5 years. So when that population boom started till now, it's been 15, 16 years, right? Well, that's long enough for those young babies to grow up, especially the young men, to grow up into fighting age soldiers, right? They are now and capable and old enough and lived through some turmoil, so they're willing. So this new militaristic spirit sweeps through the country, where this young generation is ready to go. The National Convention used the army to quell opposition at home. So the National Convention would use the army to stop the people from having like riots and stuff like that. Is that very common that a democratic government would use the army against the people? Why not? Well, let me ask you, who's in charge of a democratic government? The people. So would the people ever say, hey, army, attack me? No, they wouldn't, right? So is it a true democratic government if the government is attacking the people with the army? No, because the people would never agree to that. Does that make sense? They would never offer. The king's not going to do that either. Hey, guys, come attack me. Like, it's not going to happen, right? It crushed an uprising in Paris in October 1795, the army. This demonstrated that the new government would not accept any opposition. That uprising in Paris in October 1795 was squashed by the army, and the leader of the army at that time, a guy named Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay? They're all well aware of who helped them not get squashed. Okay? So that's why I put use the army against the people. Not good, right? Like this. So that was the National Convention rules for about 4 years after the Reign of Terror. And then in 1795, they complete another constitution. The National Convention was running the government without a constitution, so there was no set of rules. It was kind of fly by the seat of your pants, kind of making it happen, hopefully not making too many people that mad, but ultimately they needed a constitution. So number 5 government is called the Directory. It's the National Convention's Constitution. You guys will see why it's called the Directory. It's run by a board of directors, 5 people. So this government looks like this. It's got a 2-house legislative system. Do we know any other examples of a 2-house legislature at this time? English Parliament has 2, right? What are they called? House of Commons, House of Lords. Good. And then what about America? Do they have 2 houses? No, they have 3 branches. They have the House and the Senate. Yeah, they have a House of Representatives, and then we have the Senate. So we have a 2-house system as well. Generally, these 2 houses in England, there's the Commons and the Lords, right? Who makes up the House of Lords? Noble-ish people. The House of Commons, the regular people, right? In America, it doesn't exactly get broken down by sort of class, but the House of Representatives has hundreds of members, and the Senate has 100 members now, right? So there's a big and a small group. In France, they're also going to have 2 houses, the lower and the upper. Who do you think makes up the lower house? The regular people. And the upper house? The wealthy nobles, right? More like the bourgeoisie. Remember, nobles are not quite as embraced in France anymore. And then the lower house has 500 members. The upper house has 250. Why did the lower house get more? They have way more people in their class, right? That was one of the issues they had with the old system, how they had so many more people and they all got 1 vote. Remember in the Estates General? And then the upper house is chosen or chooses, the upper house chooses the executive branch. Okay? So the executive branch is like our president. In the French system, under this constitution, there's going to be 5 executives. And they're called the board of directors. So we have the executive branch that's chosen by the upper house, right? It's a 5-person board of directors. That's why it's called the Directory. They're really like the people who were in charge. Chosen by the upper house, chosen by the rich people, right? That makes it sort of influential. Are the directors, if they're chosen by the wealthy, are they wealthy probably? And where do you think they choose the directors from? Like what pool do they find? Yeah, the upper house. Do you guys see that? The upper house chooses the directors, and where they choose from? They choose from themselves. They're like, how about you do it this year, and I'll do it next year. Well, make sure we get a chance, right? Are they asking or considering what the lower class cares about? Not at all. So a couple things that the directory does, some good, some bad. The first thing the directory does is it eliminates universal man vote. You guys remember what that was called? Universal manhood suffrage. I just didn't like writing it, it felt painful. So they are going to eliminate the man vote, the universal man vote, right? Now, remember, it used to be every man, adult male, got to vote, right? Didn't matter if you owned land, because they were trying to make it as fair as possible. And there's a lot of people who didn't own land. They didn't want just the rich people to vote. Every man can vote. Well, now, that's not the case anymore. Now, only the rich guys can vote again. Because they're the only ones who own land, right? Only male landowners can vote. That's lame. Under this directory, the poor suffer more, and the rich fight amongst each other. So the poor are just getting less and less of a say under this system. But the rich, because they got more say, they're going to fight for power. Think about it. Every couple years, you got to choose a new board of directors, and you choose it from the upper house. The upper house chooses from their own group. So they sit around, they got to choose 5 of them. Think they're going to get into fights? For sure, right? They're going to quarrel, they're going to bribe, they're going to backstab, they're going to do all kinds of sort of corrupt things to get in charge. How do you think the regular people feel about this new directory? They're not going to like it very much because they're not going to get very much out of it, right? They're not very big fans of it. But weren't they just thinking about maybe just having a king like a minute ago?
Yeah.
So shouldn't be that crazy, right? Like they were just considering a king, and this is 5 kings. So like, what's the big deal, right? What's the difference? Why would they? What's the difference between this and a king? Do they? 500 of them. There's like millions of them in France. Right? They do have some democratic aspects, right? Is this better than they have a constitution? Is it better than a king? Maybe because most kings, unless it's like a unique king that gives people love and attention and stuff, whatever, maybe. But having the constitution is going to help, but it's not going to get anything done for the lower class really, because the wealthy are in control and they don't like sharing their money. They don't want to share it. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. So let's read through this. The directory governed France for 4 years. However, neither radicals nor conservatives were pleased with it. The economy improved somewhat, but peasants, workers, and the poor were still suffering. The 5 directors quarreled among themselves and were weak, corrupt rulers. When crowds protested, their directors used the army to stop the unrest. The directory was soon as unpopular as the old regime had been. Like the old regime, it had financial difficulties. Its failure paved the way for a military dictatorship in France. A military dictatorship that the people are going to cheer about and be happy. Usually, is that something people usually do about a military dictatorship? No, they don't. So, that gets us to Napoleon Dynamite. Okay. Bonaparte. Under the Directory, the ongoing wars of Great Britain, Austria, and Sardinia offered opportunities for able military leaders. Between 95 and 99, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte came to the public's attention. Born in 69 on the French island of Corsica, Napoleon attended military school in France. Already a general at age 26, Napoleon had stopped an uprising in Paris that would have prevented the creation of the Directory. Remember that uprising we talked about a minute ago that Napoleon stopped? It was the people were freaking out because they didn't like this. They knew that the National Convention was writing this Constitution and they did not like the way they were writing it. So they rioted and tried to stop them from doing it. And what does the National Convention, what do the directors do when the people are rebelling in their state? They bring in the army. Well, who's in the charge of this army? Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay? Yeah.
Isn't that an ice cream?
Neapolitan.
Oh, I was gonna ask why would they put that, but it's not even that.
Neapolitan.
Napoleon ice cream.
I was thinking short ice cream. I don't understand. Yeah. It's tough, huh? It's a tough crowd, dude. I mean, Napoleon was only 5 feet 2 inches tall.
Maybe he's 1.7. Yeah. Okay, that's really short.
Yeah, he was like the dictator of all of France. He was like big things come in small packages. There you go. So he had an extremely strong personality, like Joe. He was ambitious and energetic. I don't know about that. Ambitious? Look at it back there.
Right here.
You want some of this?
Yeah. She needs a tight man. And then
A hype man?
she'll
Where's Liam when you need him?
Oh my gosh. We get a tight man when I grow up in a rich and famous.
One day she'll be like, March 6th, 2018, Mr. Corbett class, I decided to be a dictator. I can't do it. Is it the 7th? Yeah. She decided yesterday. Just didn't say nothing. Okay, so Napoleon had great organizational skills and was a good manager of both political and military affairs. One of his smartest personal moves was to marry this really rich girl named Josephine. She was like a French society leader. Why is that a really good move? Money for one. Why else? What's that? Yeah, like social influence, right? His wife was a very popular, very like, I don't know, sort of engaging personality. And she was the leader. She'd be like I don't even know. She was like the leader of the cool group in Paris, right? She's the one that has all the fancy parties, and she's the one that everybody knows. Why does that help Napoleon? Because then everybody knows him, and he's gonna be able to meet a lot of influential people at these parties and these gatherings that his wife is going to be having. So that's a good move, and also he got rich, which he was not prior to that. So 2 days after the marriage, Napoleon won command of the French army that was fighting the Austrians in Italy. So that's part of the reason why he gets chosen to be the commander, because he's now like theoretically, he went from third to second estate with his marriage. Does that make sense?
Talk about who was the president.
Well, we are talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, right? Like, this guy's like one of the baddest generals ever. He's a total like egomaniac. So I'm not sure he's letting his wife wear his pants. He's just using his wife to get what he needs. Now, and they're married for a long time, so I don't know how it works, but it is Napoleon. We got to remember. Yeah. Why did she marry him? I heard you guys say that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's 5'2". He's like.
But he's also kind of a French hero. Definitely praised by the Directory, because if he doesn't stop the uprising, they don't have their government. So they really are, into him. Plus, he's been very successful. And in this new era, there's this strong nationalistic, this like spirit of fighting, like we talked about, for these young soldiers growing up. He's like at the forefront of that, leading those guys, getting them to be very successful. So they're like, that's the man right there. So, maybe he wasn't tall, but everything else, he checks all the other boxes. So Napoleon Bonaparte is considered one of the greatest generals of all time because of the dominant role he played starting in 96. The wars that France fought from then until 1815 are called the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon's genius lay in his ability to move troops rapidly to the most critical points on the battlefield. His opponent's tactics were older and slower. Napoleon proved his ability in Italy. The French army there was weak and poorly equipped. Napoleon improved conditions for his troops, gaining their support and boosting morale. With this newly inspired soldiers, Napoleon forced the Sardinians to make peace. He then went on to defeat the Austrians four times. 1797, Napoleon forced the Austrians to sign a treaty that gave France control of all of northern Italy. So that's great. He's doing awesome, right? He's making France look good. He's winning the wars. He's getting the enemies off their backs. But the Directory starts going, dude, this guy's getting a little too popular. Like, everybody loves him, and they don't like us. Well, why don't they like them? Well, they're the government for one, so everybody hates government, right? But why don't they like, what else? Yeah, the rich people are picking the rich people. Are the poor people doing well in this new system? No, so most of the people are unhappy because they're poor and they're hungry and all those things, right? And Napoleon's out there kicking ass and taking names, and everybody's like, that's the man, right? And the director's starting to get worried. Like, that guy could be a little too popular for us. Might be not good, right? So Napoleon proposed attacking the British in Egypt to cut off British trade because he's on a roll. He's beating everybody up. He's like, let's attack Britain. We like to attack in Britain. The directory goes, where are you going to attack him? He says, Egypt. They look at the map, Egypt, France, far away. All right, sweet. Go on, dude. Go get him. You're going to be out of Paris. That's fantastic. We'll see you when you get back. Hopefully you win. If you don't, oh well, right? Because they're thinking, dude, you're a threat, right? The directory was threatened by Napoleon. Does that make sense? You guys follow me there? So they're like all about getting him out of town. See you, buddy. At first, Napoleon won victories on land against the Egyptian forces. However, Napoleon's military campaign in Egypt ended in disaster. The British destroyed the French fleet near Alexandria, isolating the French army in Egypt. Here's one of those funny history moments, right? So the French army is stuck in Egypt. Napoleon, knowing that that's not a good thing for his career or his reputation, he tells his army, you guys just chill here, handle it for a minute. I'll be right back. He goes back to France. And did they win in Egypt? No, but he's going to tell everybody they killed it. Yeah, like conquering hero. He shows up in Paris like, we won, we did it, right? Who's the man? And people are like, yeah, dude, that's what we're talking about. Meanwhile, his army's back in Egypt, like just treading water, kind of like hoping that they don't get killed, right? He lied. And they get pretty excited. So although Napoleon became a hero from this Egyptian thing, and probably shouldn't, one of the questions, guys, people were asking is, like, why would the army follow him if he ditched him like that and then lied about it? Isn't that a reasonable question? Well, remember right before this, we talked about how Napoleon did a really good job of taking care of his army. That's one of the things that he focused on. He knew that in order for them to follow him, he had to keep them happy. So he took extra care of his army, and they were extra loyal to him. There's a million different examples, primary source quotes that suggest that the French fighting for Napoleon were not the French army, they were the Napoleon army. Right? If he would have asked them to attack France, they would have attacked France. It was his army, not the French army. Does that make sense? And so when he comes home, says, I won, the army's like, what he said, right? And they kind of go with it. So the British had organized an alliance of nations to oppose France, including Austria and Russia. Those forces drove the French armies out of Italy, and French control over the quartered territories slipped. So we got all these notes. Napoleon becomes known in Paris for defending against the Austrians. He's a general at age 26, which means he's a good leader and a smart politician. Do you guys understand why, in order to be a general at age 26, you got to be a pretty good politician, not just a good army leader? Do you guys understand why? Think about, if you're 26 years old and you're going to become general, is there anybody older than you, probably more qualified than you? For sure. So then how did you get the job and not them, right? You probably had to position yourself and to be in favor of those who make the decision, and position your rival in a place where he wouldn't be in favor, right? Well, is that army or is that politics? You guys see? He's a pretty good politician. We have the proof is that he was a general by 26. He couldn't have done that without knowing how to play the game, right? He married wealthy, a second estate woman. The director became concerned that people loved Napoleon too much. They may want him as a king. He proposes attacking British in India, or Egypt, I'm sorry. The referee said, heck yeah. Agrees to get Without they lose. He returns to Paris alone. And says they won. I'm sure he had his container with him, like he didn't travel alone, like walking across the world. No, they didn't all die. They just stayed. No, like they're holding it down.
Oh, okay.
We just took it over. They're just keep holding it down over there. Right? Becomes even more of a French hero. Napoleon's supporters believed that only he could win victories abroad and restore order at home. So, fearing that the royalists might seize control, right? Royalists, those who support the king. Who might the king be? Do they have a king like waiting? Not that we know, right? Because Louis XVI is dead, and who knows? They still support the royal idea. So, fearing that the royalists might seize control, Napoleon's supporters developed a plan to overthrow the government and put Napoleon in power. These supporters wanted France to be stable because they feared losing the property and power they had gained during the revolution. Okay, so Napoleon supporters, we'll call this Napoleon coup d'etat. Coup d'etat. Coup d'etat. What's that? Coup d'etat? Different. A coup d'etat is a seizing the control of a government secretly, and like usually without a ton of violence. Maybe a little couple guys get shot or here or there, but not like a war. So Napoleon's coup d'etat. All right. So let's look at how Napoleon is going to become basically the king or whatever. 1799, the legislature did away with 4 of the 5 directors. Okay. The legislature, they're the ones that make the rules, right? They're the law-making branch of the government. The legislature eliminates 4 of 5 director spots. So they go, okay, first things first. You 4 don't count anymore. Not going to need you anymore. Second thing is the door swings open and the army walks in. Armed troops surround the legislature and force most of its members to leave. So it forces any member. So let's say we're the legislature. This is the upper house and the lower house. Right? There's 5 directors up here. Okay? Army comes in. The 4 of these 5 directors are asked to leave because they're no longer needed. And then the army walks in, tells most of you guys, upper and lower house, if you're not 100% on Napoleon's side, you'll also be leaving, right? But they do want some people to stay because those people will be on Napoleon's side. So most of the legislature is escorted out by the army. The few that do stay are what is left of the representatives for the people. Yeah? The people that are sitting there, do they represent the people? Do they represent all the people? No. But they do represent the people in the form of the government. And there's only one director standing here. And so then the people, the representatives, say, well, the director should just be in charge. Right? Who do you think the director is? Napoleon. There's only one director left. All the people sitting, all the representatives sitting in the room are Napoleon supporters. So the Napoleon supporters are going to declare Napoleon emperor. Right? His quote is, I found the crown of France laying on the ground, and I picked it up with my sword. Right? It's a metaphor. Do you guys get it? How does he get the crown? Through force with the sword. Right? So it's his metaphor. He knows exactly what he did. It's not a secret. Right? So those who stayed turned the government over to Napoleon and his fellow plotters. Seizing power by force like this is referred to a coup d'etat. Okay? So the army seizes all representatives don't support Napoleon. Napoleon is named director. He's named director, but he's essentially what kind of ruler? What's that? Based on what kind of dictator?
Military.
Military dictator. Yeah.
So the reason he like proposed to go attack the British or the British that were in Egypt was because
To stop their trading with India.
India, yeah. Why?
They were making a killing, and that was their main colony. The British control all of India. Remember we talked about how they did that, right? And so look, if you look at the map, they go through the Mediterranean Sea, and they go through the Suez Canal. Okay, so the British have a little colony or a little canal right here. So they float this way and they go to India like that, as opposed to this way. Does that make sense? So it's way easier to go through here. So the British had a big concentration of like military and merchants and all kinds of people out in Egypt, and because they did a lot of business here, so he's going to attack the English here, so that the English can't go through, right? But they lose right here in Alexandria, and then he bogies it home and tells them they won.
But they didn't actually win, but his army was just going there.
Chilling, yeah.
And where they lost?
No, they just,
Cutting.
it's vague. This is one of those things. What's that? No, but England was like a seafaring military, like they were essentially all Navy, not a huge land force there. So when they walk a little bit out of the reach of the Navy, they can kind of do their own thing and figure out how to. I'm sure they have a plan, you know what I mean? They will make their way back to Paris pretty shortly after. But the fact that they do come back and follow, they don't stay in Egypt forever. They come back, but he gets there first, says we win. That way, when everybody else shows up, the word is they already won. There's no story about losing. And even if the story does get out that we lost, it's already, the story is we won. Does that make sense? Okay. So we'll continue, guys, tomorrow. We'll see how Napoleon really gets going. You guys have any questions? That's it for today.
Like, subscribe, and comment.
Like and subscribe in the chat box over here. Thumbs up on Twitter and stuff.
Follow my social media. Yes.